morning. There's something fascinating to me about the inner workings and the inner mechanisms of a mechanical wristwatch. And I don't own one of those. I wish I did. This is a $20 watch. It's just the most average watch you can have. But there's something cool. Maybe it's the engineer in me, the nerd in me. But I like to look because there's 100 pieces all spinning around gears and pins and rods, and they're all achieving their own individual purpose. And yet, as a collective and as a corporate whole there, they all are moving around to bring about the display of the time on the face of the watch. And so you can keep this in your mind, this mechanical wristwatch image in your mind as we go through this service today. But I want to take that and expand it. The same precision and the same accuracy, the same intentionality that goes into a wristwatch, let's take that to a global level or even a universal level. So think now of one of the little gears. You get style points if you can actually physically see through the face of the watch to see all the gears and the mechanisms, by the way, when you're going watch shopping. But just picture one of those small gears, and now picture it not as a gear or a mechanical piece, but as a child. And picture one of the larger gears moving around, but now it's an army or a nation, still moving around with this accuracy and intentionality, not to bring about the purpose of displaying the time, but to bring about the purpose of bringing about the destiny of one individual. And do you believe that that kind of accuracy or that kind of precision is possible on that kind of scale? Because if you answer yes, then you're starting to get a mind into the providence of God. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, when we think about God's providence, we think about on a very small scale. We think about it very, like we just sang God of Angel Armies. And I was thinking back, I was like, I think that's God's providence that we're talking about angel armies today, and yet here we are singing about it. That's providence. And I was thinking about it, I was like, I can't remember the last time I sang about an angel army. So I think God brought that about in our service today. I think he knew what we were going to be talking about, and we wanted to sing it as worship. But we think about things like that, or we think about God bringing one individual into our life that shared the gospel with us, and we were saved. And that is providence. Or we think about how God uses us at such a time where somebody's heart is broken, and he uses us to encourage them, and he makes our paths cross together. And we see that in Acts. We see that with the Ethiopian eunuch. We see it with Cornelius, where God brings two people together, and we know that it's providence. But do you believe that providence can happen on a massive scale? Do you believe that God would move heaven and earth to bring about the destiny of one individual? Do you believe that he would use the heart of a child and the resources of a nation for one person? Because every now and then in the Bible, God will kind of tear back the veil and let you see what he's doing. Or he'll take the face off the watch and show you all of the mechanism and the movement that's happening beneath the surface. And we see it in Habakkuk. If you even had a glimpse of what God was doing in this world through you or through Heritage, would you believe it? Could you even comprehend it? Because Habakkuk is going through, I don't know if it's called adversity, but he's going through a difficult time. And he's looking up to God and he's crying out, "How long, O Lord? How long are you going to let your name be profaned? How long are you going to let injustice happen on this earth?" And God responds and he says, "Habakkuk, if you knew what I was doing, you wouldn't even be able to comprehend it. If you knew what I was doing, even if I told you what I was doing, you wouldn't believe it." And then he tells them. And what is God doing in that day? He says, "Before you even cried out to me, I was already raising up a nation. I was raising up a nation that's going to come and judge another nation. And then I'm going to judge that nation for their evil and their wickedness." And we see, do we really believe that God would raise up a nation to fulfill his purposes? Or we get a glimpse in Genesis 28 where Jacob is going through adversity. It's his own doing, but there's a stairway. It's like a Led Zeppelin song, right? There's a stairway into heaven, and God kind of rolls the sky back like a scroll. And he just gives Jacob a glimpse into what is going on just beneath the surface. And I'll admit, I preached that to you last year, and in my little faith, in my mind, I just picture a few angels coming up and down, representing God's providence, God working out his economy on the earth. But then I started thinking, we have a God of angel armies. His title is the Lord of Hosts. It's not one or two. It's not a vacant stairwell. There's myriads and myriads, 10,000 times 10,000 angels that are moving as ministers to men and of the church. And so I'm telling you now, God's providence is on that scale. The same precision of a watch, he will use people and nations, the hearts of children, the armies of a nation to bring about your good and his pleasure. And I think if you're like me, we need to pray, God, increase our faith, because I've even hearing that, do you believe it? Do you believe that God would move heaven and earth for a single person? Do you really believe that there are millions and myriads of angels that are moving up and down from heaven to earth, the spiritual to the physical, just to minister to you? I think if we're honest with ourselves, we doubt about that. We need to pray that God would increase our faith, but every now and then, God will show us this. So there's two things happening in our text today. We're in Acts. If you'll turn to Acts 23, we started it last week. We're going to finish the chapter this week. We've seen Paul going through adversity. We've seen a couple things. We see Paul going through adversity. In every definition of the word, every way that he could, he's been going through the ringer. And he's now found himself, after basically 2 attempts on his life, he's found himself in protective custody. He's not in prison. He hasn't gone to an official trial yet. They're trying to establish the charges. And so where Paul is now, he's not in prison. You know, he might be chained to a guard, but he's in a nice room. He probably has a soft pillow. People are allowed to come and see him. He's being protected from his kinsmen and his Jews who have already made an attempt on his life. That's where Paul is. And so what we learned 2 weeks ago is that we're not comforted yet in our adversity. We're not shown how to deal with the trials and the difficulties that come in our life, but we're taught to leverage those for the sake of the gospel. And we saw Paul do that wonderfully. He makes an opportunity where an opportunity doesn't exist, and he shares his testimony, and it almost gets him killed. And then the text makes kind of a turn where last week, beginning in chapter 23, we saw that God doesn't leave you in the adversity by yourself. This is Joshua 1:9. This is Genesis 28:15. This is Matthew 28:19 and 20. This is what we just sang. God is with you, and he will keep you wherever you go. And so that's why we say the God of Angel Armies is always what? Then that's Acts 23. Because the very last verse that we read was 23 verse 11. The following night, the Lord stood by him physically, and he said, "Take courage, for as you have testified the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." So now there's a pastoral note. Jesus comes, and he comes to him really not as the counselor that we would want. He comes to him as a cornerman, as a trainer and a coach, getting him ready for the fight that's ahead. But we see that there is a pastoral note in this. He does come to him, and he says, "Take heart. You're doing everything right." And he kind of graciously reveals to him the itinerary that's ahead of him. But to this point, they've had a relationship like Sherlock Holmes and Watson, where if you've read Sherlock Holmes, he doesn't ever tell Watson what's happening, right? Watson, he doesn't ever know the plan. He just kind of goes along with the plan and figures it out as it goes, which we can relate to that because we have the same God as Paul. And so he doesn't always tell us the end from the beginning. We know the ultimate end, but we don't always know our plan from the beginning, as we're going to see in a minute. But here he graciously tells them, "You're going to Rome." And then ministering both to Paul physically, but to us in hindsight, we get to see in our text today all of the things that God does to bring about that journey. And you're going to see, he tells Paul, "You must go to Rome." And as you're going to see, Paul doesn't do a whole lot to make that happen. Everybody else, 10,000 people, or at least 1,000 people, take 10,000 steps each to get Paul started on his journey to Rome. But Paul really doesn't do anything. So I want to pick up right here in verse 11 and show you one thing. Jesus says to Paul, "Take courage, for as you have testified the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." And so here's what I want to show you. Listen to the divine imperative. You must go to Rome, Paul. And if God says you must do something, looking at the other passages where there's these divine imperatives, it is going to happen. Paul is going to be in Rome. He's going to minister in Rome. I'm going to read to you John 10. And listen to the divine imperative in this familiar passage. 10:14, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. So this is Jesus saying, it's not just the Jews that are part of my flock, it is the Gentiles as well. I have sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them in. They will listen to my voice. Hear the divine imperative. And now he tells Paul that mission to the Gentiles, you're a part of it. You must go to Rome. And now we're going to see Paul is going to go there. And how he gets there is pretty incredible. So remembering again this idea of a watch, there's a lot of activity. I'm going to read all the rest of chapter 23, and I just want you to see just how much activity is happening in Jerusalem. You're going to see a bunch of activity on the part of the Jews as they attempt to kill Paul. There's this child that's having to run back and forth between the temple and the tribune, and then there's a whole army that's stirred up as they begin to make plans, and the tribune starts to exalt himself as he gets this army going. And then just remember poor Paul and the role that he plays in this whole endeavor. So if you will, read with me Acts 23, beginning in verse 12. When it was day, the Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 who made this conspiracy. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, we have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food till we have killed Paul. Now therefore, along with the council, give notice to the tribune to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case more exactly, and we are ready to kill him before he comes near. Now the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush, so he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Paul called one of the centurions and said, take this young man to the tribune, for he has something to tell him. So he took him and brought him to the tribune and said, Paul the prisoner called me and asked me to bring this young man to you, as he has something to say to you. The tribune took him by the hand and going aside asked him privately, what is it you have to tell me? And he said, the Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire somewhat more closely about him. But do not be persuaded by them, for more than 40 of their men are lying in ambush for him, who have bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they have killed him, and now they are ready, waiting for your consent. So the tribune dismissed the young man, charging him, tell no one that you have informed me of these things. Then he called two of the centurions and said, get ready 200 soldiers with 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go as far as Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night. Also provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely to Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter to this effect. Claudius Lystias, to his excellency the governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them when I came upon them with soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. And desiring to know the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council. I found that he was being accused about questions of their law, but charged with nothing deserving of death or imprisonment. When it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers to state before you what they have against him. So the soldiers, according to their instructions, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. And on the next day they returned to the barracks, letting the horsemen go on with him. When they had come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they presented Paul also before him. On reading the letter, he asked what province he was from, and we had learned that he was from Cilicia. He said, I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive. And he commanded him to be guarded in Herod's praetorium. And so looking back in verse 12, did you notice all of the activity that's happening? All about one person, just because of Paul and his message. So it starts over here with the Jews, and they begin spinning their wheels. And they're going through all this effort. You have the Jews, you have 40 men who are apparently have nothing to do with the Sanhedrin. They're not Sadducees. And so they go and they begin making a plot after the night has passed. They begin making a plot to kill Paul. And apparently it's pretty serious because it says, anathematize themselves with an anathema, which basically saying, may we be damned, may we be under God's curse if we do not bring this thing to pass. So the Jews have not given up on their quest to kill Paul. And so they they create this goal, and we should probably talk a little bit about SMART goals this morning. You know what a SMART goal is? Okay, we'll get to that. But for those of you who know, start thinking about this. They make a SMART goal. It's specific. We're going to measure Paul, or we're going to murder Paul. And it's attainable. They go to the high priest, and apparently the door is wide open for this to happen. They go and they approach the council, and they say, we have this plan to murder Paul. You don't even have to get your hands dirty. All you have to do is call the Romans and say that we want to continue this trial of Paul. We have a couple more legal matters to attend to. And when you're going to bring him into the temple, we're going to be lying in ambush, and we're going to murder him. We've sworn an oath we're not going to eat or drink until this happens. And so they're wanting to do it immediately while he's there in Rome. And so it's amazing that they go to the elders and the rulers of the people, and they say, we're going to murder this guy. And they should step in and say, no, right? It's like the second graders going to the teacher, or high school students going to the teacher and saying, we're going to cut class 5th hour, and them saying, all right, we'll go with you. That's not what this is supposed to be. They're supposed to be the upholders of the law, the rulers and the elders, and they consent to it. And they go along with the plan, and you see that it's the people who tell the elders what it is they're going to do. And they consent knowing that they can do this. The blood won't be on their hands. It'll be on the hands of these 40 men. It says, when it was day, the Jews made a plot. They bound themselves. They anathematized themselves with an anathema. They're not going to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. And there were more than 40 who made this conspiracy. They go to the chief priests and the elders, and they say, we have strictly bound ourselves to taste no food until we have killed Paul. It says, now you there, along with the council, give notice to the tribune, bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case more exactly. And we are ready to kill him before he comes near. And so now Paul's going to get word of this. And this situation, I wonder if it brings to his mind the words of David in Psalm 59. Turn there with me. Let's read this. It's amazing how many Psalms are relevant to this story, but this one, the inscription says, is a Psalm of David when Saul sent men to watch his house in order to kill him. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who work evil, and save me from bloodthirsty men. For behold, they lie in wait for my life. Fierce men stir up strife against me. For no transgression or sin of mine, O Lord. For no fault of mine, they run and make ready. Awake, come to meet me and see, you, Lord, God of hosts, our God of Israel. Rouse yourself to punish all the nations and spare none of those who treacherously plot evil. So I wonder if Paul recognizes what David recognized, that God is the Lord of Israel. God has in his control. It says right here, he's the Lord of hosts. It's God who's in control of angel armies. And you see the Jews, these elders of Israel, we've already seen their total rejection, right? They've rejected Jesus. They've rejected the 12. They've rejected Stephen and Paul. They've heard the gospel preached from every possible preacher, the best preachers. And they've rejected it. And now you see the men, you see what a hardened conscience can do. You can see what a hard heart is capable of. And it's exactly what Jesus talks about in John 15. They are going against the will of God, thinking that they are going to be doing God a favor and be in service to him. And then you see in God's providence, he takes their unrighteousness and he uses it for his good. And so that is what our God does. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. God works all things for our good. And so you see here in John 15, I'm going to read you this. He says, if I had not done among them the works that no one else did, they would not have been guilty of sin. But now they have seen and hated both me and my Father. But the word that is written in their law must be fulfilled. Must be fulfilled. They hated me without a cause. Chapter 16, I have said these things to you to keep you from falling away. They will put you out of the synagogues. Indeed, the hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is offering service to God. And they will do these things because they have not known the Father nor me. But I have said these things to you so that when their hour comes, you may remember that I told them to you. Does that sound familiar? And so here God even uses that. He even uses them thinking that they're killing Paul, doing service to God, and God uses it for his glory. So look, you have the gear turning here. All of the Jews begin to spin their wheels, and they try to think, what are we going to do about Paul? And this gear starts another gear spinning. And this is back in verse 16. Now it says, the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush. So all that activity starts this activity. And who knew Paul had a sister? This is the only time we hear about Paul's family in the whole Bible. It's just right here. It says it so matter-of-factly. Like we know her, right? The son of Paul's sister. Paul's nephew hears of the ambush. Now let's look at all his activity. So he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Paul called one of the centurions and said, take this young man to the tribune, for he has something to tell him. All kinds of activity. So he took him and brought him to the tribune and said, Paul, the prisoner, called me and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you. The tribune took him by the hand and going aside asked him privately, what is it that you have to tell me? And he tells him the whole plot of the Jews. The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire somewhat more closely about him. But do not be persuaded, for more than 40 of their men are lying in ambush. They have sworn neither to eat nor drink till they have killed him, and now they are ready, waiting for your consent. And so the tribune dismissed the young man, charging him, tell no one that you have informed me of these things. And so we have here a young man. Every time this word's used in the Bible, it's translated young man. So how old is a young man? It's a young man. We think somewhere probably between 20 and 30, but some people think he's much younger because it says that the tribune takes him by the hand and pulls him aside. Although, and then his description is kind of his sophisticated language, so we don't know, but we know he's a youth of some kind. And you see what is kind of the pivotal gear in all of this. All of this is interconnected. There's the activity of the Jews, and you see that this nephew of Paul overhears it, and so it gets him moving, and then he goes and he reports to the Romans, and they start plotting to overdo this plan of the Jews. And so he actually is the critical gear, the smallest player in this. It's not 40 men, it's not an army, it's one individual. And so I want to show you, or just point out to you, that God can use the child, the youth, to do something incredible. And he probably, like the Jews are doing things for their own selfish gain, their own hard hearts. The Romans are doing things, as you're going to see, Claudius Lystias is infinitely selfish. He's looking out for his own interests. But I see this young child, and I wonder what were his interests when he goes to tell the council or tell the tribune about Paul. Maybe it's an act of faith. Maybe he's just looking out for his uncle. But if there's one thing I know, that this is the pivotal piece, and it's the only piece that's carried out by an individual person, and it's the one that's carried out by a youth. And so I'll just share this with you. Every now and then, once I wrap my mind around a text or a passage, sometimes I need a little help wrapping my heart around the passage before I come and talk to you guys. And so I'll go pick up, it's actually my favorite part of preparation, I'll go pick up devotionals. Or I'll sit down and I'll look through YouTube and just find people giving devotionals over passages, just like I said, to wrap my heart around it. And that's what I was doing a few days ago. I'm sitting on my couch looking for some aids to get my heart ready. And I'm watching all these guys, and one guy, it's just all this information. One pastor says, Antipatris is about 35 miles from Jerusalem. I'm like, all right, that's helpful. Yeah, it's another 25 miles to Caesarea. Great. And Caesarea is on the coast. It's a harbor city, and it has a natural harbor there, and it's great, and it's easy access. That's why all the Romans, all the governors live in Caesarea. Perfect. But I'm looking for something for my heart, right? I'm looking for something to shepherd my heart. And I remember I was beginning to get frustrated as I was going through all of these videos, and I came across the video of a young girl who made a YouTube channel to give devotionals. And I thought, maybe she can shepherd my heart and get me prepared for that. And it wasn't the big players in this instance that really moved me. It wasn't the big-name pastors. It wasn't the PhD guys. It was this faithful little girl, because the first thing she does is pray. And I was like, well, maybe I should have thought of that, right? She prays and she prepares herself just to do a little devotional. And then she unlocks all of this, and she begins to say, look at what God can do in the hands of a child. Look what she can do with the heart of a child. And I was like, all right, well, now I'm ready. Like, now my heart is... And so don't underestimate what God can do through you or through a youth. And don't forget that he does the pivotal things. That's just his mode of operation. He uses the weak things to shame the strong. Not always, but typically. And so I have a word of encouragement for you. If you are brokenhearted, or you're frustrated, or you're a child, beware. Because that's the exact people that God uses. Look how he uses not only the army of Rome and all of the wealth and power and the roads and the infrastructure of Rome. He uses the heart of a child, the willing heart of a child, to bring about this overarching task of bringing Paul to Rome. Which makes us think, like, what insignificant things do we do that we think, maybe I'm being faithful, maybe I'm not. This doesn't seem like it's accomplishing anything large. Well, we don't know the big picture. And maybe God's going to be gracious to us like he is with Paul or like he is with Habakkuk or Jacob, where he kind of tears back the veil and lets us have a glimpse. But here we get to see kind of how God is working out his economy, and you see all of the means that he uses, and he uses the heart of a child. And so his movement here with this gear sets another gear in motion. Now he gets Rome behind it. Verse 23. The tribune calls 2 of the centurions and says, "Get ready 200 soldiers with 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen. Go as far as Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night and provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely to Felix the governor." And he wrote a letter. So now I want to tell you, do you know what a SMART goal is? So worldly wisdom would say, if you have something to do, you want to set a goal for yourself, or you want to make a plan, it needs to be, it's an acronym, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. How many of you have heard about SMART goals? If not, you're just learning all kinds of stuff today. Go make some plans. So I bring this just so you can wrap your mind around what's going on in the text, because look at the plans of Claudius Lystias. He makes himself a SMART goal. It's specific. He says, provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely to Felix. There's the objective. We got to get Paul safely to Felix. And we're going to read on. He's going to do it. They're going to leave at 9 p.m. and they're going to make it by morning. And it's specific. It has a task. It's measurable. Look at what he does. Take 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen. Get 470 guys. That's a measurable goal. Attainable. He takes half of his own platoon, or whatever they call it. He takes half of his own men from Antonia, and he attributes them to this cause. It's relevant because they're about to make a play on Paul's life, and he is under the protection, right? He's in protective custody. It's his job to keep Paul safe. And actually, a capital charge has been brought against Paul, and so at some point he's going to have to go to Caesarea and be charged by the governor there. And so you see there's a relevancy here where he has to get Paul out, and he's got to get him out now because the Jews, it's not safe for him in Jerusalem. And then finally, it's time-bound. He says, you're going to leave at 9 p.m., and I want you to arrive by the morning. And people will point out it's 35 miles to Antipatris, which is where they're trying to get. They want to get past the dangerous road. They're trying to get past the point where all of the Jews might be lying in ambush for Paul's life. And so he sends all these men, and they have to march 35 miles in a night. But, I've never done that. I've never marched before, but apparently it's a very long way, and it's very hard to do. It was 70, but they go to Caesarea. They stop in Antipatris, and they go to Caesarea the following day. He'll point that out in just a second. So it'll be 60 total, the 35 plus the 25. And so I want to show you it's not just a SMART goal. It's not just the Romans that have the SMART goal, but look at the goal of the Jews. Specific, murder Paul. Measurable, does Paul still have his head? Yeah, then we haven't done our job, right? It's attainable. It's way too attainable, in my opinion. You go to the rulers of the people, and everybody just buys straight into this goal. Relevant, they got to get Paul before he's taken away. They want to get him now. They've got this plan that can bring him in now, and it's time-bound. They say, we're not going to eat or drink until this happens. And if you know anything about the Jews, you swear by one thing then you got to do it. You swear by another thing, you don't have to do it. They're the kings of getting out of these little predicaments they put themselves in. So did all these men die when they didn't kill Paul? There's no way, no. They're too hypocritical to do that. They love themselves too much. And so I want to point out, too, God has a smart goal for Paul, but like the plans in our life, he doesn't give us all of the details. So here's what Paul gets of the plan. Paul, go to Rome. And if he cried out like Habakkuk, he's sitting in prison, and if it's me, I'm saying, okay, or if he's in protective custody, okay, I'm chained to a guard. How am I going to get to Rome? And maybe we start spinning our wheels, and the problem is we're not a wheel, sometimes we're a gear. And God's got a plan, and he's moving it forward. So again, what is Paul doing in this while all of this activity is going on? Sleeping, praying, trying to come up with a way to get out of prison. And you see, God is doing all of the movement here for him. God is going ahead and moving it for him. And so we're not always given all of the information. Sometimes we're just graciously given the task. You're going to go to Rome. And if he cried out like Habakkuk did, how long, O Lord? And if God told Paul, you wouldn't even believe how you're going to get to Rome if I told you. Because how does Paul get to Rome? Well, you're going to be taken by an army to Caesarea, and you're going to spend 2 years there. And already he's going to be going, well, maybe I didn't want to know the plan. And you're going to get in a boat, and a grain boat, and you're going to go port to port, and you're going to get blown by a Eurocyclodon and get shipwrecked in Malta for a time. And then you're going to get on another boat after you've gotten bit by a snake, and then you're going to end up, right? You wouldn't have even believed it if he told him. Who could have come up with Paul's route to Rome? And so let's keep reading. Claudius, and part of all of this that's going on, he says he wrote a letter to the governor, Felix the governor. And you're going to learn all about them in the coming weeks, but just remember this. Pontius Pilate was to Jesus as Felix and Festus are to Paul. He was a governor as well. And so you can kind of see they were his later replacements down the line. But Claudius writes a letter to the governor, and here's what he says, verse 26. Something to this effect: Claudius Lystias, to his excellency the governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them when I came upon them with soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. Now, some of you are smiling. Is that how it happened? Not exactly. I think he left out the part about stretching him out to flog him, that little bit that could have got him fired or killed. He left out the bit about that he didn't know he was a Roman citizen until later, after he had handcuffed him. So he leaves out some of the details, which just shows he's not, this plan that's happening, this plan that God is using, has nothing to do, it's the selfish, hardened heart of Lystias who's trying to promote himself. And it's just like the selfish attitudes we have where when we daydream, we're always the hero, aren't we, of our own daydreams and of our own stories. Nobody else is the hero of your daydreams. You're the hero of your daydreams. He just happened to write it in a letter for us to read. And so he writes, he wants to puff himself up to the governor. And so he says, I rushed down just in time. I knew he was a Roman citizen. I had to save him. And when I got there in the nick of time, and then I desired to know, verse 28, the charge for which they were accusing him. I brought him down to their council, which is true. I found that he was being accused about questions of their law, but charged with nothing deserving death or imprisonment. And when it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him. And so the rest of this is true. This is exactly what happened. He translating, he says, I tried to see if there's any charges that would stick, and it seems like they're just having a fight over their own Jewish theology. He hasn't really done anything that's guilty of death or imprisonment as far as the Romans are concerned. And so he says it's a capital case. They're angry. They're trying to ambush him, and so I'm sending him to you. He can be under your protection and your care. And so here we see the plot to the plan going forward, verse 31, and here's Paul's first steps toward Jerusalem right here. So the soldiers, according to their instructions, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris, 35 miles, and on the next day they returned to the barracks, letting the horsemen go on with him. When they had come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they presented Paul also before him. And so kind of like a NASA space shuttle, right? Once it clears the atmosphere, the boosters come back. Once Paul's safe, once he's made it as far as he needs to go, the rest of the men go ahead and come back because it's a long march to go another 25 miles to Caesarea when Paul's already safe. And so at this time, the horsemen on the Romans' roads, they could travel huge distances. And so the horsemen go on with Paul. The other soldiers return back to Jerusalem. And it says, verse 31, the soldiers, according to their instruction, we said that. Verse 33, when they had come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they presented Paul before him. And on reading the letter, the governor asked what province he was from. And when he learned that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive. And he commanded him to be guarded in Herod's praetorium. And so our text ends here with, he just says, what are you in my jurisdiction? Where are you from? Paul says, I'm Paul of Tarsus. I'm from Cilicia. And he says, then when your accusers get here, when the Jews come, you will have a trial before me. And you'll see this is the first official trial of Paul, and that'll come through Lou talking about it next week. And so I want to show this is what R.C. Sproul said, one of my favorite theologians. He says that it's miracle enough that God would speak into existence everything that is. That he would, in a moment, with one word, speak out of nothing, ex nihilo, speak into existence all that is. He said, if the only thing that competes with that kind of glory and majesty, the only thing that is more profound to me that God could do that is that he could work in and through his own creation. So the only thing more marvelous than creation is the doctrine of God's providence. The fact that he would use the heart of a child and the wealth and resources of a nation to bring about your good and my good and his good pleasure. And so I want to point out there's a few people that get this wrong, and it's helpful to understand. The deists, they see the watch analogy, but they get it wrong. They look up and they say, God, he wound the clock back, and then he just takes his hands on it. He sets the whole universe in order, and then he's just a hands-off God. And I think intellectually we would all say, you guys have it all wrong. That's too simplistic. Our God is a God of providence. He doesn't just set the universe in order and then walk away. And so intellectually we say, yeah, of course that's true. But then I think in practice, we tend to forget that. We tend to limit God, and we think that he wouldn't make our matters of that kind of importance. And we recognize that the deists miss something there. It's too simplistic. God doesn't just set the watch, he works in and under it. He does it in such a way, and this is why Sproul was so amazed, he works through us in our own hard hearts. He works through unbelievers in their apostasy. He works through us in our free choices. How does God sovereignly work through our free choices? And when you can explain that to me, then you've understood the providence of God. That's how he works. It's not like the deists. It's too simplistic. And then you have the atheists who say there is no God. They look at the watch face and they see the hands displaying the time, and they say that's all there is. The hands display the time, but there's nothing working in and behind it to make it happen. They see the storm and they say there's nothing behind that storm bringing it, controlling where it goes or what it's doing. They look at somebody like Paul going from Jerusalem to Rome, and they say there's no string tying all those things together. Those are just the rational choices of men and the events that happen. And that's how it happened. There's nothing in and behind that. And so we recognize that is the very definition of God's providence. He's working in and through all of it. And so it's not like the watch face. What if you took the face off the watch and you look inside at the inner mechanism of the watch? And now there's a specific term for this. Do you know what that is called? What the technical term is for all this junk that is in the watch? It's called the movement. And I think that's interesting, because what the atheists and what the deists are missing is they're missing the movement of God. They're missing the hand of God orchestrating all these things. And so that's what I want to leave you with, and I want you to remember the Apostle Paul. How did he take his first steps to Jerusalem? He didn't really do anything, did he? It was 1,000 footsteps from 10,000 other people that took his journey to Rome, and it's going to be that way for the rest of the time. He is in God's capable hands, and so I want to leave you with a few things. Number one, don't discount the little things that you're doing. Number one, because you don't know what God is doing through you. You don't always know the bigger picture. To be faithful like the child in the little things, and don't think of God's providence as something small. God only knows what is happening through Heritage Church. And I'm just looking now at the youth that we just sent out that have hearts for Uganda and Africa, and we have people that are wanting to go to Spain, and what is God going to do in and through us? And don't limit it to some kind of localized thing. And remember the pastoral note of Acts, that God doesn't leave you in your adversity. He is there with Paul. He was moving before Paul even entered the adversity. Even now, while we're thinking ahead to what's going to happen, people are making contracts. The government's making a contract to build ships and to fill the ships with grain that Paul's going to go on. All of these things are happening, and so it is with us. And Jesus is here with us. And I want to remind you of the words of Joshua 1:9, Genesis 28:15, Matthew 28. Behold, pay attention, God is with you in your adversity, and he will keep you wherever you go. Would you all pray with me? Oh Lord our God, how marvelous are your hands. How marvelous is what you are accomplishing on this earth through your people for our good. We stand like Habakkuk. We all fall silent when considering that you are moving heaven and earth to minister to us, to fulfill our destinies so that we can walk in the paths that you have given us to walk in, that you would move people in this world, children, armies, resources of nations, just for the church. And God, we are so grateful. If you are willing to do that, then we know our souls are safe in you. We thank you that you are with us through the adversity and in the adversity. And Lord, we love you so much. We can't praise you enough. Please allow us to lean into your providence, to dream big. And we pray that you will do an amazing work through Heritage, and that we would be aware that we are doing it all for your glory. Amen and amen.